The smell of hay and horses was the first thing Harrison Wade noticed when he pushed open the barn door that September morning in 1873, followed immediately by the sight of a woman's body crumpled near the empty stall where his mare usually stood. His heart lurched into his throat as he dropped the bucket of oats he had been carrying and rushed forward, boots thudding against the packed dirt floor. The woman lay on her side, her dark hair matted with sweat and dust, her riding dress torn at the hem and stained with what looked like dried blood on one sleeve. Harrison knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her neck to feel for a pulse. Relief flooded through him when he felt the steady beat beneath her skin, though her breathing came shallow and labored. She was alive, but clearly in bad shape. He glanced around the barn as if the walls might tell him how she had gotten there, but found no answers in the shadows. His ranch sat 3 miles outside Fort Stanton, New Mexico, far enough from town that unexpected visitors were rare, especially ones who collapsed in his barn. Without another moment of hesitation, Harrison slid his arms beneath her knees and shoulders, lifting her as gently as he could. She was lighter than he expected, her body almost fragile in his arms. As he carried her across the yard toward his house, he noticed the sun had barely crested the horizon, painting the desert landscape in shades of orange and gold. The woman stirred slightly against his chest, a soft moan escaping her lips, but her eyes remained closed. He maneuvered through the door of his modest ranch house, kicking it shut behind him before carrying her to his bedroom. It was the only proper bed in the house, and she needed it more than he did. Harrison laid her down carefully on top of the quilt his mother had made before she died, then stepped back to assess the situation more clearly in the morning light filtering through the window. The woman appeared to be in her early 20s, with delicate features and skin that suggested she spent most of her time indoors rather than under the harsh desert sun. Her dress, though damaged and dirty, was well made, the kind of thing a woman of some means would wear. A gold locket hung around her neck, catching the light. Harrison noticed her hands were scraped raw, as if she had fallen or crawled across rough ground. He fetched water from the pump outside and clean cloths from the chest in the corner, then returned to her side. Dipping a cloth in the cool water, he began to gently clean the dirt from her face and hands. As he worked, he found himself studying her features more closely than was probably proper. Even unconscious and disheveled, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten. Her dark lashes rested against her cheeks, and her lips, though chapped and pale, had a delicate curve to them. Harrison had been alone on this ranch for 3 years, ever since his father passed and left him the property. At 26, he had resigned himself to a solitary existence, focused on building up the herd and making the ranch profitable. Women in Fort Stanton were scarce, and the few unmarried ones had never shown much interest in a quiet cowboy who spent most of his time with cattle and horses. He had told himself he did not mind, that he preferred the simple life without complications. But as he sat beside this mysterious woman, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath, something stirred in him that he had thought long buried. A protectiveness, certainly, but also a curiosity that went beyond merely wanting to know how she had ended up in his barn. He wanted to know everything about her, who she was, where she came from, what had brought her to his isolated corner of New Mexico. The woman's eyes fluttered open suddenly, unfocused and glazed with fever. They were a striking shade of green, like new grass after spring rain. She looked at him without recognition, her lips moving as if trying to form words. "Easy now," Harrison said softly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder as she tried to sit up. "You are safe. You are at my ranch outside Fort Stanton. Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and barely audible. Please do not let them find me." Before Harrison could ask who she meant, her eyes rolled back and she slipped into unconsciousness again. He felt her forehead and cursed under his breath. She was burning up with fever. Whatever had happened to her, whatever had driven her to his barn in the middle of the night, she was in bad shape now and needed medical attention. The nearest doctor was in Fort Stanton, a 3-mile ride that would take at least half an hour each way. Harrison glanced down at the woman, weighing his options. He could leave her here and race to town, or he could try to bring the fever down himself first. Given her frightened words about not being found, he suspected that bringing strangers here might not be what she wanted. He decided to try treating her himself first. Harrison had dealt with fevers before, in calves and horses, and even once in himself during a bad bout of influenza. He fetched more cool water and began placing damp cloths on her forehead, wrists, and neck. He removed her dusty riding boots and noticed blisters on her heels, as if she had walked a great distance. Whatever had happened, she had been through an ordeal. Hours passed as Harrison tended to her. He spooned water between her lips when she stirred, changed the cooling cloths regularly, and kept watch over her as the sun climbed higher in the sky. His ranch work went undone for the first time in years, but he could not bring himself to leave her side for more than a few minutes at a time. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen, the woman's fever finally broke. Her skin cooled and her breathing deepened into what looked like genuine sleep, rather than fevered unconsciousness. Harrison allowed himself to relax slightly, leaning back in the chair he had pulled up beside the bed. Exhaustion washed over him as the adrenaline that had been keeping him alert finally faded. He must have dozed off, because when he opened his eyes again, the room was darker and the woman was awake, watching him with those remarkable green eyes. This time they were clear and focused, taking in her surroundings with obvious wariness. "How do you feel?" Harrison asked, sitting up straighter. "Like I have been trampled by a horse," she said, her voice still rough but stronger than before. "Where am I exactly?" "My ranch about 3 miles from Fort Stanton. I am Harrison Wade. I found you collapsed in my barn this morning." He paused, giving her time to process that information. "What is your name?" She hesitated, and he saw fear flicker across her face before she seemed to make a decision. "Zara." "Zara Bennett. Miss Bennett, can you tell me what happened to you? You said something about not wanting to be found." Zara closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again they were bright with unshed tears. "I ran away. From a man my father wanted me to marry. Victor Thornton, a wealthy merchant from Santa Fe. He is 20 years older than me and has a reputation for being cruel to his wives. He has been married twice before, and both wives died under mysterious circumstances." Her hands clenched the quilt. "My father owes him money, gambling debts. He sold me to settle the debt." Harrison felt anger kindle in his chest. He had heard of such arrangements before, but that did not make them any less reprehensible. "So you ran." "I took my horse and left in the middle of the night 3 days ago. I thought I was following the road to Roswell, where I have an aunt who might take me in. But I got turned around in the dark, and then my horse threw a shoe. She went lame, and I had to leave her at a stream about 5 miles back. I have been walking since yesterday morning." She looked down at her hands. "I must have reached your barn sometime in the night. I remember seeing the building and thinking I would just rest for a moment, but then everything went dark." "Your horse," Harrison said. "A bay mare with a white star on her forehead." Zara's eyes widened. "Yes." "Have you seen her?" "She is in my barn. She found her way here yesterday evening. I put her in a stall, gave her food and water. I was planning to ask around town today to see if anyone had lost a horse." He saw relief wash over Zara's face. "She will be fine. The shoe can be replaced." "Thank you," Zara said, and tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you for helping me. If you had not found me, I think I might have died there." Harrison reached out instinctively, covering her hand with his. "You are safe now. I give you my word. No one will harm you while you are under my roof." The touch of his hand seemed to steady her, and she looked up at him with an expression that made his heart skip. Gratitude, yes, but also something else. A connection that felt instant and profound, as if in that moment they both recognized something essential in each other. "I should let you rest," Harrison said, though he found himself reluctant to break the contact. "You have been through a terrible ordeal. Are you hungry? I can fix you something to eat." "I am starving," Zara admitted. "I have not eaten since the day before yesterday." Harrison stood and headed to the kitchen, where he put together a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried apples. It was not fancy, but it was what he had on hand. As he worked, he found his mind racing. What was he going to do about Zara Bennett? She obviously could not stay here indefinitely. It would ruin her reputation if word got out, and in a small town like Fort Stanton, word always got out. But he also could not in good conscience send her back to a forced marriage with a man who might be a murderer. When he returned to the bedroom with a tray of food, Zara had managed to sit up, propping herself against the pillows. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, dark waves that caught the lamplight. She looked young and vulnerable, but there was also a strength in the set of her jaw that spoke of determination and courage. It took guts to run away from the life her father had planned for her, to strike out on her own with nothing but a horse and hope. "Here," Harrison said, setting the tray on her lap. "It is not much, but it should help." Zara ate slowly at first, then with increasing appetite. Harrison sat back down in the chair, watching her and trying to figure out what to do next. "Where is your father now?" he asked. "Santa Fe. We were living there while he worked as a clerk for the territorial government. At least, that was supposed to be his job. Mostly he just gambled and drank." Bitterness crept into her voice. "My mother died 2 years ago. After that, he stopped even pretending to care about anything but cards and whiskey. And this Victor Thornton, will he come looking for you? I am sure he will. My father too, though probably only because he is afraid of what Thornton will do if I am not delivered as promised." She set down the half-eaten apple, suddenly looking sick. "They were supposed to have the wedding 3 days from now. By now they know I am gone." Harrison did the math in his head. If they were searching for her, it was possible they would expand their search radius to include Fort Stanton. It was not directly on the route to Roswell, but someone might think to check the nearby towns and ranches. The last thing he wanted was for Thornton to show up at his door demanding his runaway bride. "You can stay here as long as you need," Harrison said. "Until you are strong enough to travel, at least. Then we can figure out how to get you safely to your aunt in Roswell." "I cannot ask you to risk yourself for me," Zara protested. "If Thornton finds out you helped me, he might cause trouble for you. He has money and influence." "Let me worry about that," Harrison said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "Right now you need to focus on recovering your strength." Zara looked at him for a long moment, those green eyes searching his face. "Why are you doing this? You do not even know me." It was a fair question, and Harrison was not entirely sure he knew the answer himself. Yes, it was the right thing to do, helping someone in need. But it was more than that. From the moment he had seen her in his barn, something had shifted inside him. A sense of protectiveness so fierce it almost frightened him, combined with a pull toward her that defied rational explanation. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because no woman should be forced to marry a man she does not want, especially one who might be dangerous." Zara's expression softened. "You are a good man, Harrison Wade." The way she said his name, soft and sincere, made warmth spread through his chest. He stood abruptly, suddenly aware of how intimate this situation was, alone in his bedroom with a beautiful woman. "You should rest now. I will be right outside if you need anything." Over the next few days, Zara's health improved steadily. The blisters on her feet healed and color returned to her cheeks. Harrison had given her the bedroom while he slept on a bedroll in the main room, and during the days, she began to move around the house more, insisting on helping with small tasks, despite his protests, that she should continue resting. He found himself looking forward to each interaction with her, to the sound of her voice, and the way her face lit up when she smiled. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives. Zara told him about growing up in St. Louis before her family moved west, about her love of reading and her dreams of one day seeing the ocean. Harrison told her about the ranch, about building it up from nothing after his father died, about the satisfaction he found in working the land and raising cattle. The more time he spent with Zara, the more Harrison realized he was falling for her. It was not just her beauty, though he certainly noticed that. It was her spirit, her intelligence, the way she refused to let her circumstances defeat her. She helped him cook meals and insisted on learning to milk the cow, laughing at her own clumsy attempts. She had a quick wit and a kind heart, and being around her made his solitary ranch house feel like a home for the first time in years. But Harrison kept his growing feelings to himself. Zara had just escaped one forced relationship, and the last thing he wanted was to make her feel pressured or obligated. Besides, what could he offer her? He was just a rancher with a modest spread, living a simple life far from civilization. Zara deserved more than that. On the 5th day after he found her, Harrison was out mending a fence when he saw riders approaching from the direction of Fort Stanton. His stomach tightened as he counted 3 men on horseback, moving with purpose toward his property. He set down his tools and walked out to meet them, positioning himself between the riders and his house where Zara was inside preparing lunch. The man in the lead was well dressed in a city suit, his face hard and calculating. Harrison disliked him on sight. The other 2 were rougher looking, hired guns by the look of them. "Good afternoon," the well-dressed man said, reining in his horse. "I am Victor Thornton, and I am looking for a young woman who may have passed through this area. Dark hair, early 20s, likely traveling alone. Her name is Zara Bennett, and she is my fiancée." Harrison kept his expression neutral, though his heart was pounding. "I have not seen anyone matching that description. Not much traffic comes through this way." Thornton's eyes narrowed. "Mind if my associates take a look around?" "Just to be certain, I do mind, actually," Harrison said, his voice level but firm. "This is private property, and you have no legal right to search it without cause." One of the hired guns moved his hand toward his gun belt, but Thornton held up a hand to stop him. "No need for hostility, Mr. Wade. That is your name, is it not? I asked in town. They said you keep to yourself mostly, run your cattle, do not cause trouble. That is right, and I would like to keep it that way. The thing is," Thornton continued, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "Miss Bennett is my property. We have a legal agreement signed by her father. She belongs to me, and anyone who helps her is interfering with a legal contract." "Women are not property," Harrison said flatly. "And I have nothing more to say to you. I suggest you move along." For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Harrison was aware of how exposed he was, standing alone against 3 men. But he also knew that Thornton could not just start shooting without consequences, not unless he wanted to answer to the law. Finally, Thornton smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. "Very well. But if you do happen to see Miss Bennett, you would be wise to inform me immediately. I can be very generous to those who help me, and very unforgiving to those who do not." He wheeled his horse around, the other two men following. "We will be in town for a few more days at the hotel. You know where to find me." Harrison watched them ride away, not moving until they were out of sight. Then he turned and hurried back to the house. Zara was standing at the window, her face pale. "That was him," she said. "Victor Thornton." "I figured." Harrison locked the door behind him, something he never normally did. "He does not know you are here, but he is suspicious. We need to get you to your aunt in Roswell as soon as possible." "I am putting you in danger," Zara said, her voice trembling. "I should leave tonight, go on foot if I have to." "You are not going anywhere alone," Harrison said firmly. He crossed to where she stood and took her hands in his. "I will take you to Roswell myself. We will leave tomorrow morning before dawn. It is a 2-day ride, but I know the back trails. We can avoid the main roads where Thornton might be watching." "Harrison, I cannot ask you to do this." "You are not asking, I am offering." He squeezed her hands gently. "Zara, He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence, how to explain what he was feeling, this overwhelming need to protect her, to be near her, to make sure she was safe and happy. "What?" she prompted softly. "I care about what happens to you," he said finally. "More than I probably should, given we have only known each other a few days, but I do." Zara's eyes searched his face, and he saw his own feelings reflected there. The same wonder, the same confusion, the same undeniable pull. "I care about you too," she whispered. "You saved my life, Harrison. You have been kind to me when you had no reason to be. You have asked for nothing in return. I have never met anyone like you." They stood there, hands clasped, the space between them charged with everything they were not quite saying. Harrison wanted to kiss her so badly it hurt, but he held back. Not yet. Not when she was still running from one man, still vulnerable and uncertain about her future. "We should prepare for the journey," he said, though he made no move to let go of her hands. "Pack light. Food, water, warm clothes for the nights. Your horse should be sound enough to travel now." Zara nodded, but she also stepped closer, rising on her toes to press a soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything." That night, Harrison lay awake on his bedroll, listening to the sounds of the house settling around him. He thought about Thornton and the threat he represented, about the journey ahead, about what would happen when they reached Roswell and Zara went to live with her aunt. Would that be the end of it? Would he simply ride back to his ranch and return to his solitary life, trying to forget the dark-haired woman who had stumbled into his barn and turned his world upside down? The thought made his chest ache. In less than a week, Zara had become essential to him in a way he did not fully understand. The house felt right with her in it. He felt right when he was with her, as if he had been only half alive before and was now fully awake for the first time. But what could he do? He had nothing to offer her except a hard life on a remote ranch. Zara deserved comfort, security, a chance at the kind of life she had known before her father's gambling destroyed everything. She deserved better than him. They rose before dawn, moving quietly through the dark house as they gathered their supplies. Harrison saddled both horses, checking and double-checking that everything was secure. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when they finally set out, riding southwest toward Roswell. The landscape was stark and beautiful in the early morning light, all red rock and scrub brush stretching to distant mountains. They rode in comfortable silence for the first hour, following a trail that wound through a series of low hills. Harrison kept watch for any sign of other riders, but the land appeared empty, except for the occasional jackrabbit or hawk. As the sun climbed higher, they stopped to rest the horses and share some of the bread and dried meat Harrison had packed. They sat in the shade of a large boulder, passing a canteen back and forth. "Tell me about Roswell," Harrison said. "And your aunt, what is she like?" "I have not seen Aunt Martha in 5 years," Zara admitted. "She and my mother were not close. My mother thought Martha was too independent, too unconventional. She never married, runs a boarding house in Roswell, makes her own money, answers to no one." She smiled slightly. "My mother found that scandalous, but I always admired her for it. You think she will take you in?" "I hope so." In her last letter, she mentioned that I would always have a place with her if I needed it. Of course, that was 2 years ago, and I do not know if the offer still stands. Zara's expression grew worried. "What if she does not want me? What if she sends me back?" "Then we will figure something else out," Harrison said. "There are always options, Zara. You do not have to go back to your father or Thornton. You could find work, make your own way like your aunt did." "What kind of work? I have no skills, no training." "I can read and sew and play the piano, none of which are particularly useful out here." "You can learn," Harrison said. "You are smart and capable. I have seen that this past week. You could be a teacher or a seamstress or a dozen other things." Zara looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You really believe that, do not you, that I can make my own way?" "I do." She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I wish I could stay at your ranch. These past few days, helping you around the house, talking with you in the evenings, it has been the happiest I have been in years. I felt useful. I felt wanted, not as a piece of property to be traded, but as a person." Harrison's heart clenched. "Zara, I would like nothing more than for you to stay. But think about what that would mean for your reputation. An unmarried woman living alone with a bachelor. It would cause talk, and not the kind you could ignore. It would close doors for you, make your life harder." "I do not care about my reputation," Zara said fiercely. "I care about being with someone who treats me like an equal, who does not try to own me or control me. Someone who makes me feel safe and happy." They looked at each other, the air between them electric with possibility. Harrison reached out, cupping her face gently with his hand. "I feel the same way," he said. "From the moment I carried you into my house, I have not been able to stop thinking about you, about how right it feels when you are near, how empty everything seems when you are not. I know it is too fast, that we barely know each other, but Zara, I am falling in love with you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "It is too fast," she agreed. "It makes no logical sense, but I am falling in love with you too, Harrison Wade. You are everything I never knew I was looking for." This time, when he leaned in to kiss her, there was nothing to hold him back. Their lips met softly at first, tentative, then with growing passion. Zara's arms came up around his neck, and Harrison pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. The kiss was everything he had imagined and more, sweet and fierce all at once, a promise of what could be. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "We still need to get you to safety," he said. "Thornton will not give up easily." "I know," Zara whispered, "but now I have something to fight for, a future I actually want." They rode on through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they moved further south and west. The terrain grew more rugged, with steep canyon walls and narrow passes that slowed their progress. As evening approached, Harrison began looking for a place to camp for the night. He found a sheltered spot near a small spring, hidden from the main trail by a stand of juniper trees. They unsaddled the horses and set up a simple camp, building a small fire as the temperature began to drop. The desert nights could be cold, even in September. They ate a simple meal of beans and hardtack, sitting close together by the fire. Above them, the sky darkened to deep purple and then black, stars beginning to appear like diamond dust scattered across velvet. It was the kind of night that made Harrison grateful for the life he had chosen, the wide open spaces and the silence broken only by the crackling fire and the distant call of coyotes. "It is beautiful out here," Zara said, gazing up at the stars. "Wild and free. I can see why you love it." "It can be hard too," Harrison said honestly. "Lonely, unforgiving, but yes, I love it. This land gets into your blood, becomes part of who you are. Tell me more about your ranch. What are your plans for it?" Harrison found himself talking about his dreams for expanding the herd, about digging an irrigation system to make better use of the creek that ran through his property, about maybe one day building a bigger house. As he spoke, he found himself imagining Zara in those plans, saw her in the bigger house he described, pictured them working side by side to build something lasting. "That sounds wonderful," Zara said when he finished. "You are building something real, something that matters." "My father never built anything. He just took and took until there was nothing left." She paused. "I do not want to be like him. I want to create something, to work for something that is mine." "Ours," Harrison said impulsively. "If you want it to be." "Zara, I know this is sudden and maybe I am crazy for even thinking it, but when we get to Roswell, I do not want to just leave you there and ride away. I want you to come back with me. As my wife, if you will have me." Zara stared at him, her eyes wide in the firelight. "Harrison, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am. I know it is fast, but when something is right, you just know. I have never felt this way about anyone, and I do not think I ever will again. You are it for me, Zara Bennett. If you will take a chance on a simple cowboy who has nothing much to offer except a ranch, a good horse, and a heart that is completely yours." Tears streamed down Zara's face, but she was laughing too. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I would rather have a life with you in that small ranch house than a mansion with anyone else. You have given me more in a week than anyone else has in my entire life. You have given me hope and freedom and love." Harrison pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. When they broke apart, he said, "We will do it right. Get to Roswell, talk to your aunt, make sure you are legally free of any claim your father or Thornton might have. Then we will find a preacher and get married proper." "And then I will come home with you," Zara said, smiling through her tears. "To our ranch, our life together." They talked late into the night, making plans and sharing dreams. Harrison spread out his bedroll and Zara lay beside him, tucked safely in his arms. They did not do anything improper, but the intimacy of lying together under the stars, her head on his shoulder and his heart beating steady beneath her ear, felt more profound than anything Harrison had ever experienced. The next morning they set out early again, both eager to reach Roswell and start the process of building their future together. The terrain became more challenging as they descended into the Pecos Valley, but Harrison knew these trails well and guided them safely through. It was mid-afternoon when Roswell finally came into view, a small but growing town sprawled along the banks of the Pecos River. Unlike Fort Stanton, which was primarily a military town, Roswell was developing as a ranching and farming community, with irrigated fields stretching out from the river. They rode down the main street, drawing a few curious looks from townspeople. Harrison felt protective of Zara, aware of how vulnerable she still was, until they could legally establish her independence from her father and Thornton. "Martha's boarding house should be near the edge of town," Zara said, scanning the buildings. "There. I think that is it." The boarding house was a two-story structure with a wide porch and neat curtains in the windows. A sign hung out front reading, "Martha Buchanan's Rooms." They tied their horses to the rail and climbed the steps to the front door. A tall, sturdy woman in her late 40s answered their knock. She had the same dark hair as Zara, those streaked with gray, and the same green eyes. Those eyes widened in recognition and surprise. "Zara, is that really you?" "Hello, Aunt Martha," Zara said, suddenly shy. "I am sorry to arrive unannounced, but I had nowhere else to go." Martha pulled her into a fierce hug. "Nonsense! You are always welcome here, child. Come in, both of you." She ushered them inside and led them to a comfortable sitting room. "Now, tell me everything. Your father wrote me 2 years ago saying you were in Santa Fe, but I have heard nothing since." Over the next hour, Zara told her aunt everything, with Harrison adding details where necessary. Martha's expression grew increasingly angry as the story unfolded, particularly when they reached the part about the arranged marriage to Victor Thornton. "That damned fool," Martha muttered when Zara finished. "I told my sister not to marry him, that he was weak and selfish, but she would not listen. And now he has tried to sell you like cattle to pay his debts." She turned to Harrison. "And you, young man, you are sure about this, about marrying my niece after knowing her less than a week?" "More sure than I have ever been about anything," Harrison said firmly. "I love her, madam. I will spend my life making sure she is happy and safe." Martha studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you. You have kind eyes, and you protected my niece when you did not have to. That speaks well of your character." She turned back to Zara. "But we need to make sure this is all legal. Your father signed a contract with Thornton. We need to find out if it is legally binding, and if so, how to break it." "There is a lawyer in town," Harrison said. "We passed his office on the way here. We could go see him now." The lawyer, a middle-aged man named James Crawford, listened to their story with growing interest. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "The good news," he said, "is that such contracts are not as ironclad as some might think. A woman cannot be forced to marry against her will, regardless of what her father signed. However, there may be financial consequences. If Thornton paid money or extended credit based on this arrangement, he could sue your father for breach of contract or fraud." "I do not care what happens to my father," Zara said quietly. "He made his choices." "The problem," Crawford continued, "is that Thornton may try to claim you are legally engaged and attempt to force the marriage through various means, including taking you back to Santa Fe against your will. What you need is protection, both legal and physical, until the matter can be resolved." "What do you suggest?" Harrison asked. "Marriage to someone else would make it impossible for Thornton to claim any right to Miss Bennett. If she is legally married, the contract with her father becomes null and void. The question is whether we can accomplish that before Thornton finds you here." "How long would it take to arrange a marriage?" Zara asked. "If you can get a license and find a preacher willing to perform the ceremony, it could be done today. There is normally a waiting period, but given the unusual circumstances, I think I can convince the clerk to expedite matters." Harrison and Zara looked at each other. Getting married today, right now, was even faster than they had planned, but it also made sense. The sooner they were legally wed, the sooner Zara would be safe from Thornton's claims. "Let us do it," Zara said, "if you are still willing." Harrison took her hand. "I told you last night you are it for me. Today, tomorrow, whenever, as long as we end up together." Crawford smiled. "Then let us go see the clerk and get you that license." The next few hours passed in a blur. The clerk, after hearing their story and receiving a strongly worded legal opinion from Crawford, agreed to issue the marriage license immediately. The town preacher, Reverend Williams, was sympathetic to their plight and agreed to perform the ceremony that very evening. Martha insisted on closing her boarding house for the evening and throwing together a proper wedding celebration. She recruited several of her boarders to help, and by the time Harrison and Zara arrived at the small church, There was a respectable gathering of well-wishers, most of whom had only learned of the wedding an hour before. Zara had borrowed a simple blue dress from Martha, and someone had woven wildflowers into her hair. She looked beautiful and nervous as she walked down the aisle to where Harrison waited. He wore his best shirt and pants, his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Harrison's voice shook slightly as he repeated his vows, promising to love and cherish Zara for the rest of his days. Zara's voice was clear and strong when she made the same promises, her eyes never leaving his face. When Reverend Williams pronounced them man and wife, Harrison pulled Zara into his arms and kissed her deeply, not caring that they had an audience. This was real. She was his wife now, and he was her husband, and nothing could change that. The celebration afterward at Martha's boarding house was joyful and boisterous. Martha had prepared a feast, and the boarders and neighbors who had attended the ceremony stayed to toast the newlyweds. Harrison found himself swept up in the warmth of it all, the sense of community and shared happiness. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than himself. As the evening wore on and the guests began to drift away, Martha pulled him aside. "You take care of my niece," she said, her voice gruff with emotion. "She has been through too much already." "I will," Harrison promised. "I will spend every day making sure she knows she is loved and valued." "Good," Martha smiled. "And you tell her she is always welcome here, both of you. If you ever need anything, you come to me." Finally, as night deepened, Harrison and Zara said their goodbyes and headed to the room Martha had prepared for them. It was a corner room on the second floor, with a large, comfortable bed and windows that looked out over the town. For the first time, they were truly alone as husband and wife. Harrison felt suddenly nervous, aware of how momentous this night was. But when Zara came into his arms, all the nervousness faded. This was right. This was where he was meant to be. They made love slowly and tenderly, learning each other's bodies with wonder and care. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the lamplight, talking softly about the future. "I cannot believe this is real," Zara whispered. "A week ago I was running for my life, and now I am married to the most wonderful man I have ever met." "Believe it," Harrison said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You are stuck with me now, Mrs. Wade." "Mrs. Wade," Zara repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that." They stayed in Roswell for 3 more days, making sure all the legal paperwork was in order and giving Zara time to reconnect with her aunt. On the 3rd day, a man arrived in town asking questions about a runaway bride. Word reached them through Martha's network of friends that the man matched the description of one of Thornton's hired guns. "We should leave," Harrison said. "Head back to the ranch before they figure out where we are." "What if they follow us?" Zara asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Let them try," Harrison said grimly. "You are my wife now, legally and in every other way. No one can take you from me." They said goodbye to Martha, promising to visit again soon, and set out on the 2-day journey back to Fort Stanton. Harrison took a different route than they had used coming down, staying off the main trails as much as possible. They saw no one except a few distant cowboys working cattle, and Harrison began to relax slightly. On the evening of the 2nd day, they crested the final rise and Harrison's ranch came into view. The small house and barn sat in their familiar places, looking solid and welcoming in the fading light. Zara reined in beside him, taking in what was now her home. "It is perfect," she said softly. "It really is." They rode down to the house, and Harrison helped Zara dismount, then lifted her in his arms and carried her across the threshold. She laughed, her arms around his neck, and kissed him as he set her down. "Welcome home, Mrs. Wade," he said. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Harrison returned to his ranch work, tending the cattle and horses, mending fences and preparing for winter. Zara threw herself into making the house a home, cleaning and organizing, planting a small garden, learning to cook the simple meals that suited their life. She proved to be a quick learner and insisted on understanding every aspect of running the ranch. "If this is going to be our life, I want to be a full partner in it," she told Harrison one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Teach me everything. How to handle the cattle, how to birth a calf, how to read the weather. I want to be useful." So Harrison taught her, patiently showing her how to rope a steer, how to doctor a sick animal, how to ride hard and shoot straight. Zara took to it all with enthusiasm, and Harrison found himself falling more in love with her every day. She was fearless and determined, willing to try anything and not afraid to fail. They made one trip into Fort Stanton about a month after their wedding, needing supplies and wanting to check if there had been any trouble from Thornton. The townspeople were surprised to see Harrison with a wife, but most were welcoming once they heard the story, at least the version that left out the more scandalous details. The general store owner, a friendly man named Tom Garrett, congratulated them warmly. "About time you settled down, Wade. A ranch needs a woman's touch." At the hotel, they learned that Thornton had been through about 2 weeks earlier, asking questions. But when he heard that Zara was married and safely ensconced on a ranch miles from town, he had apparently given up and returned to Santa Fe. The hotel keeper said he had looked furious but had not caused any trouble. "I think he realizes he has no legal claim now," Harrison said as they loaded supplies into their wagon. "You are safe, Zara, really safe." Zara leaned against him, relief evident in her posture. "I can hardly believe it is over, that I am truly free." "Free and loved," Harrison corrected, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Never forget that second part." As autumn deepened into winter, life on the ranch took on a quiet contentment. They worked hard during the days and spent the evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other from the few books Harrison owned or simply talking about their dreams for the future. Harrison taught Zara to play poker, and she taught him a complicated card game she had learned as a child. They laughed together, worked together, and at night they came together with a passion that never seemed to diminish. In December, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Harrison on Christmas morning, her face glowing with happiness and nervousness. "A baby," Harrison repeated, stunned. Then a huge grin spread across his face and he swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Zara asked, laughing at his enthusiasm. "Happy? I am over the moon. Zara, this is the best Christmas present I could ever receive." He set her down gently, suddenly concerned. "Are you feeling well? Should you be working so hard, maybe you should rest more." "I am fine," Zara assured him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not made of glass." But Harrison noticed she did not protest too much when he insisted on taking over more of the heavy work around the ranch. He was fiercely protective of both Zara and the child she carried, and though she rolled her eyes at some of his more excessive precautions, he could tell she was also touched by his concern. They made plans for the baby, discussing names and preparing the small second room in the house as a nursery. Harrison built a cradle from oak wood, working on it in the evenings while Zara sewed tiny clothes and blankets. As her belly grew round with their child, Harrison found himself almost overwhelmed with love for his wife and the family they were creating together. Spring arrived with its annual burst of new life. The cattle dropped calves, Zara's garden began to sprout, and everywhere Harrison looked, the world seemed full of promise. Zara's pregnancy progressed normally, though the last few months were difficult in the summer heat. She remained active and involved in the ranch work as much as Harrison would allow, stubborn about maintaining her independence even as her body changed. In late July, Zara's labor began. Harrison had arranged weeks earlier for Martha to come stay with them for the birth, and thankfully she had arrived 2 days before. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Harrison paced outside the bedroom door, feeling utterly helpless as he listened to Zara's cries of pain. Finally, in the late afternoon, he heard a new sound, the thin wail of a newborn baby. Martha opened the door, her face exhausted but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy boy with good lungs, and Zara is fine, just tired." Harrison rushed into the room. Zara lay propped against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion, but she was smiling as she cradled a tiny bundle against her chest. When Harrison approached, she turned the blanket back so he could see the baby's face. The infant had a cap of dark hair and was red-faced from crying, his tiny fists waving in the air. Harrison felt his throat tighten with emotion as he looked at his son, this perfect tiny person that he and Zara had created together. "He is beautiful," Harrison whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's soft cheek with one finger. "You are beautiful. Zara, I am so proud of you." "Do you want to hold him?" Zara asked. Harrison nodded, too overcome to speak. Zara carefully transferred the baby into his arms, and Harrison looked down at his son with wonder. The baby's eyes, unfocused and dark, seemed to look right at him. "Hello, little one," Harrison murmured. "I am your father. Welcome to the world. What should we name him?" Zara asked. They had discussed several names but had not decided on one. Looking down at the baby, Harrison suddenly knew. "Henry, after my father, Henry Wade." "Henry," Zara repeated, smiling. "I like that." "Henry Wade, welcome to your home." Martha stayed with them for 2 weeks, helping Zara recover and teaching them both the basics of caring for a newborn. It was exhausting and overwhelming at times, but Harrison had never been happier. Watching Zara nurse their son, seeing the gentle way she cradled him and sang soft lullabies, filled Harrison with a contentment he had never imagined possible. The ranch work continued, of course, though Harrison hired a local teenager to help with some of the heavier tasks during the first few months after Henry's birth. Zara recovered her strength gradually, and by autumn, she was back to working alongside Harrison, with Henry often secured in a sling against her chest or napping in a basket in the shade of the porch. Life fell into a new rhythm, busier and more chaotic than before, but rich with love and purpose. Harrison often found himself stopping in the middle of a task just to watch Zara playing with Henry, or to listen to the sound of his son's laughter echoing across the yard. These were the moments he treasured, the simple everyday magic of family life. When Henry was 6 months old, they received word through a neighbor that Zara's father had died in Santa Fe, apparently from complications of his drinking. Zara took the news quietly, and Harrison held her as she cried for the father he had been when she was young, before the gambling and alcohol destroyed him. "I hope he found peace," she said eventually. "I forgave him a long time ago. I had to for my own sake. But I am sad that he never got to meet Henry, that he could not see how good life can be when you make the right choices." Harrison kissed the top of her head. "You broke the cycle," he said. "You chose differently, and because of that, Henry will grow up knowing he is loved and safe. That is what matters." As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Harrison expanded the herd and improved the property, and Zara proved to have a good head for the business side of things, keeping the books and negotiating prices with buyers. They made regular trips to visit Martha in Roswell, and she became a beloved grandmother figure to Henry. When Henry was 3, Zara became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter was born on a cool spring morning with far less difficulty than Henry's birth. They named her Sarah, after Harrison's mother, and she had her mother's green eyes and dark hair. 2 years after Sarah came another boy, Daniel, and then 3 years later, their last child, a daughter they named Emma. The ranch house that had once seemed too large for one man now rang with the sounds of children playing and laughing. Harrison built additions onto the house as their family grew, and together, he and Zara created a home filled with love and warmth. They taught their children to read and ride, to work hard and treat others with kindness. They passed down the story of how Harrison had found Zara collapsed in his barn, how they had fallen in love in the space of a week, and how that love had built a family and a life. On their 10th anniversary, Harrison and Zara stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and crimson. The children were inside, Henry supposedly watching his younger siblings, though the squeals of laughter suggested they were mostly just playing. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked, pulling Zara close against his side. "Giving up the life you might have had in a city for this?" Zara looked up at him, her green eyes still as striking as the day he first saw them. "Not for a single second. This life, this family, it is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it." She smiled. "You saved me, Harrison, in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Harrison said. "I was just existing before you, not really living. You made everything brighter, better. You gave me a reason to build something lasting." They kissed, long and slow and full of the deep contentment that comes from a decade of shared joys and struggles, of facing life together and coming through stronger for it. "Mama, Papa, Henry is being mean," Sarah's voice called from inside, followed by Henry's protests that he was not. Zara laughed and pulled away. "Duty calls. Our children need us." "Our children need you to stop them from killing each other," Harrison corrected with a grin. "I will be in shortly. Let me just check on the horses." As Zara went inside, Harrison took a moment to look around at everything they had built. The barn where he had first found Zara now expanded to hold more horses and cattle. The fields where she had planted gardens that now flourished. The house where their children slept safely every night, where love and laughter filled every room. He thought about that September morning 11 years ago when he had pushed open the barn door and found a mysterious woman collapsed inside. How terrified he had been, how uncertain. He could never have imagined then where that moment would lead, the life it would open up for both of them. But then, the best things in life were often the unexpected ones. The chances you took when your heart told you something your head could not quite explain. The risks that turned into the greatest rewards. Harrison had taken a chance on loving a woman he barely knew, and she had taken a chance on trusting a cowboy who offered nothing but honesty and a hard-working life. Together they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something worth every risk they had taken. As he headed toward the barn to check on the horses, Harrison heard the sounds of his family drifting out from the house, Zara's voice calming the children, Henry's laugh, Sarah's chatter, and underneath it all, the contented sounds of home. His home. Their home. The barn door creaked as he pushed it open, and for just a moment, Harrison remembered that morning, the fear and urgency, the weight of Zara in his arms as he carried her to safety. He smiled, silently thanking whatever twist of fate had brought her to his door. Some people spent their whole lives searching for the right person, for the love that made everything else make sense. Harrison had been lucky enough to have that love quite literally collapse into his life, and wise enough to recognize it when he saw it. As he moved among the horses, checking that all was well, he made a mental note to tell Zara again tonight how much he loved her. He tried to tell her every day, to never let her doubt for a moment how precious she was to him, but it bore repeating. Love like theirs deserved to be celebrated, acknowledged, cherished. When he returned to the house, the children had settled down and Zara was reading them a story by lamplight. Harrison stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the scene, burning it into his memory. This was what mattered. This was everything. As if sensing his presence, Zara looked up and smiled at him, and in that smile, Harrison saw their whole story. The frightened woman in his barn, the tentative trust that grew between them, the leap of faith they both took, and the beautiful life they had built together. He saw the love that had sustained them through challenges and changes, that had grown stronger and deeper with each passing year. He crossed to where his family sat and settled down beside them, pulling Emma into his lap while Daniel leaned against his side. Zara continued reading, her voice soft and soothing, and Harrison closed his eyes, letting the moment wash over him. This was home. This was happiness. This was the life he had been meant to live, and he had found it the day he found a woman collapsed in his barn and had the courage to let himself fall in love. The future stretched ahead of them, full of unknowns and possibilities. Their children would grow up and make lives of their own. The ranch would continue to change and evolve. Harrison and Zara would grow old together, their dark hair turning silver, their hands weathered by years of work. But through it all, the love that had begun in a single week would remain the foundation of everything they built, the steady heartbeat at the center of their lives. Harrison knew that no matter what came, as long as he had Zara by his side, he could face anything. And Zara, looking at her husband surrounded by their children, felt the same certainty. She had run away from a life that would have destroyed her and had run toward an uncertain future. But that leap of faith had led her to Harrison, to this ranch, to these children, to a love so deep and true, it still took her breath away. As the sun fully set and darkness settled over the New Mexico desert, the Wade family remained together in the warm glow of lamplight, safe and content in the home they had made, blessed by the love they shared, grateful for the day fate had brought them together. This was not just a happy ending, Harrison thought as he kissed the top of Emma's head and caught Zara's eye over Henry's shoulder. This was a happy life, still unfolding, still full of surprises and joys yet to come. And he would treasure every moment of it, just as he treasured every moment since that September morning when a woman's collapsed form in his barn had changed everything. The story of how they met would be told for generations in their family, passed down to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The cowboy who found a woman in his barn and fell in love. The woman who ran toward freedom and found home. The love that began in crisis and grew into something unshakable. But for now, in this moment, they were simply a family together, reading stories and sharing warmth, building memories that would last a lifetime. And that was more than enough. That was everything.